We were about 4 days across the ocean when I worked up enough courage to approach this lithe, fabulous creature of great animation and ask her to dance. It was evening. I crossed a glass dance floor illuminated by colored lights. It seemed to me the mood and the moment were right. She was seated at a table with the other screen figures. When I worked up enough guts to ask for the dance, she carefully hesitated. She looked about among her friends, eyebrows raised. Perhaps, she said indifferently. Come back later. I slunk back to my table, the longest few yards I ever had to make. There were two things I wanted to see on my arrival in New York. One was Jack Dempsey's restaurant, and the other was Harlem. That was about all I knew of New York, by hearsay, other than it had the tallest buildings in the world. I was surprised when a Warner Brothers man met me at the pier. He took me to the St. Moritz Hotel and said goodbye to me after I checked in. I got in the elevator. Who should be in there but the very alluring Princess Tiarovich? We had seen each other on board ship, but had never spoken. She gave no sign of knowing me. I said nothing, but she said to the elevator boy, "What floor is room 801 on?" "On the eighth, of course," answered the elevator boy. I went on up to the 10th. Did I dare? I kept thinking. Was I a man or a mouse? Anyone with the least bit of sophistication could tell that that was her way of telling me what room she was in. In my small room, I hesitantly picked up the phone and called her. I was answered by a deep, delightful, slightly Russian accent. "Hello? Who is it?" I rattled as fast as I could. "Look, I do hope you will forgive me, but I was in the elevator with you just now and we were on the same boat. I wondered if I could." "Oh, yes, I remember you now. Of course. Would you care to come to my apartment?" I rushed to my dresser, grabbed a bottle of cologne, squirted it everywhere, combed my hair, knotted my best tie, and was on my way. It was a large apartment, making my quarters seem a little like a dog kennel. "I have some champagne. Would you care to join me?" Would I? She chatted about the voyage. Was I going to do in the States? What was I going to do in the States? "Oh, you're going to Hollywood." She would be doing this too. She hoped we might even meet out there. I hoped we would, fervently. We went on drinking. We finished a second bottle of champagne. The picture changed. It hadn't taken me long at that. Next, she was in my arms, and, as I would learn not long after how it would be called in Hollywood, in a fierce clinch in her bed. After a while, there After a while, there were the murmured soft tones of the satisfied male, and little whimpers in Russian from her. It came time for the second bout. Suddenly, I leaped up with a yell, a real scream of pain. I clutched at my buttocks. It seemed as if I had been bitten by 10 scorpions. I looked down. There was blood on my hands. I stared at the princess. She had a strange gloating in her eyes, a truly savage look. She held in her hands a hairbrush with a long handle and very prickly, hard hairs. It looked like a miniature baseball bat, except I'm not sure whether the bristles were of hair or of some kind of thin steel. The princess must have had this brush under the bed or somewhere close at hand, for at the propitious moment of our engagement, to employ a euphemism, she brought it down with all her force on my bare arse. I stared at her in bewilderment. She dropped the brush and held out her arms as if she were finished. I was. Candidly, I was afraid of this woman now. She might get it into her head to whack me in the head next, or some other more sensitive spot. I backed off and got dressed in a hell of a hurry. She said, "Goodbye, dear. See you in Hollywood." It was my first experience with sadism. The Warner Brothers publicity man, Blake McElroy, reluctantly acquiesced in my wish to see Harlem. We went to several dives. I have never understood the white American reaction to black female pulchitterude. It seemed to me that the girls were positively stunning, and in all shades, from dark to white. The dancing I had never seen before, but it was highly exciting, lewd, lascivious. It was dark in this place. Cigarette haze added to the eeriness. I asked one of the particularly enticing girls for a dance. I turned about on the floor with her for a while, then invited her to sit at our table for a drink. She said she could bring a friend for my friend. I said that'd be fine. The drinks had the effect of breaking down my inhibitions to the point where I found my hand on a beautiful thigh. I moved it higher, then higher, finally to the highest, and my God! There I was paralyzed, holding in my hands. I didn't know what to do. My hands seemed held to him and shocked like a current of electricity will do to you. I broke the electric bond. "Come on," I said to the publicity man. "Let's get out of here." I left a few bucks on the table and we scrammed. What the hell kind of women were these Americans? John Barrymore told me much the same thing happened to him once. I went on to Chicago by train. There I was met by Sam Clark, the Warner Brothers representative. He took me to a sumptuous penthouse which was kept for Warner Brothers personnel. As soon as I met him, he burst out laughing. It appeared that he had heard what happened to me in Harlem. Clark was a fat, amiable fellow, with a balding head ringed by a fringe of curly hair. It was he who came up with the idea that I should be billed as an Irishman from Ireland. He had me photographed as a motorcycle cop. That fitted into the American conception of what an Irishman fresh in from Ireland should look like and be. You were assumed to be Irish, your name being Flynn. I had to pose for another picture. In this, I had to kiss a female cousin, Maureen O'Toole, from the old sod. She was a beautiful blonde, and the work wasn't hard to do. She confided her name was Susie Goldstein. That's how I got my start as an Irishman. Nobody knew or cared that my whole life was spent in Tasmania, Australia, New Guinea, England. From then on, for a long time, nobody believed me when I talked of that background. They didn't want to hear of it. They wanted me to be Flynn of Ireland. About now, I had a curious psychological experience. A mood of incredulity came over me. Was I really in Chicago? Why wasn't I back in New Guinea with the Melanesians, with their Stone Age dress and implements all about me? Where were the bows and arrows, the campongs? Was it possible that on one planet two such diversified environments could exist? To which did I really belong? Where was Jack Ryan? What was Dusty Miller doing? Coates. Had I really met such a man? What was I doing headed for some new Eddy Creek where Sutter had been before me? Was this Chicago of the skyscrapers, penthouses, and strange comforts on the route? This land of the broad expanses and fantasy of bigness? Was I in it, really? Could it be that I, who had just an honest-to-God true-life experience with a real Russian princess, had not long before been in the humble and joyful Tupersali and the quiet and submissive Mahiti? 4 days later, I flew to Hollywood. It was the beginning of 1935. I was 26 now. I lived in an apartment near the Los Angeles Tennis Club. I wanted to get in as much tennis as I could, to keep in shape. Weeks went by. I was just a spare wheel on the Warner Brothers lot. I did nothing. One day, I got a message to go to the cashier's office and pick up my checks. There were 6 for me, a windfall. I was getting paid to play tennis. I made friends with some young people named Falkenberg. Jinx was then only 15. She played tennis, so did her mother. I went to their house for meals. Jinx introduced me to a strange American custom. Coca-Cola with 2 aspirins. It got you high as a kite, she said. Whatever that meant, I wanted to try it anyway. I haunted the studio, hoping that somebody besides the cashier would remember I was around or alive. Nobody seemed to give a damn. I bought a little car. Often I went for a spin with a big fellow named Bud Ernst. He was 6'5", weighed about 250 pounds. He was a flyer, a fun guy. We palled around as I waited for something to happen. At the studio, I lunched regularly with a young unknown writer named Jerry Wald. Sometimes we ate with the Epstein brothers, also unknown writers. None of us had assignments. All of us felt desperation with the seeming indifference of the studio. Through Wald's director friend, Mike Curtis, I finally got a part in a picture. I was elated. It was a film with Warren Williams as the lead. In the story, The Case of the Curious Bride, a grade B job, Williams has shot some unknown persons. He has to identify the body. My part was to be that of the dead body. I was wheeled onto the set of a morgue table. I lay there, beneath the sheet, holding my breath. If you have to be a corpse, sport, I told myself, be magnificent. Williams swiftly pulled back the sheet. That's him, all right, he said. He replaced the sheet. I was wheeled out. Some people claim it was my best role. It was right after my part as the corpse that I saw Lili Danita again. I was on the tennis court at the studio when she passed and called a delightful feminine hello. To my astonishment, she was friendliness itself. The incident on board ship was forgotten. She had come to the studio to meet her friend, Dolores Del Rio. She was wearing a dress of white and plum-colored silk. Her hair was not exactly braided, but it was in 2 loops behind her head. She wore a little beret. She rustled when she walked. Lili always seemed to rustle. It was one of her wonderful traits. No one could rustle an entrance into a room better than she. No one could seat herself better on a chair or a sofa or even a park bench, so daintily spreading her skirts. The hello she called went far into my life. Would I care to have a drink at her place, the Garden of Allah? What a name! You bet I would. In a very few days, I found myself in an adjoining apartment at the Garden of Allah. What began as an affair went far beyond that. We decided it would be a good idea to take a house. We found one with a fantastic view on top of Lookout Mountain. We hired a couple of domestics, the Flemings. Jim Fleming afterwards became my stand-in and was with me for 15 years. Thereafter, Lili showed me a great deal of the surroundings. We went everywhere, to Palm Springs, to San Diego, to San Francisco. She showed me plenty. In Mexico City, we were guests of the Figueroas, an ancient Spanish family. We flew down from Los Angeles on one of those early commercial planes, a 3-motor job, which Lili thought was more interesting than any 2-motor plane. She said in broken English, "Why you wish to go the other way when... Why you wish to go the other way when we can have 3 motors for the price of only 2? We will go down and stay with Dolores." But on our arrival, we put up at the Figueroas. Lili had known the young and extraordinarily attractive Carmen Figueroa through Dolores Del Rio. Dolores was one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen, like an Aztec princess, of olive skin, with wondrous eyes. She proposed that we make a visit to the ancient pyramids behind Mexico City. After that, she said, I will take you to meet a good friend. In the vicinity of the Aztec ruins, built before the invasion of Hernando Cortez, I couldn't escape the thought that Dolores herself may have descended from the Aztecs. She was very artistically minded. It was only natural that an art follower like Dolores would know the world famous painter Diego Rivera, for it was to him that she led us after the inspection of the pyramids. For it was to him that she leaves after the inspection of the pyramids. Rivera had a fantastic home just outside Mexico City, a two-story structure set off by the usual Mexican patio. About the patio was an extensive garden with varieties of cactus, pot plants, color in abundance. He greeted Lily pleasantly. He gave me a frown, I think of disdain, perhaps because I may have looked young and immature. I realized he was a spectacular-looking man. You could compare his looks, his face, his full-length appearance to a cross between a walrus, a snipe-nosed pig from Berkshire, and a fish. His big brown eyes seemed about to pop out of his head. I took his right hand. It felt like 3 stalks of asparagus. It was wet, even though it was dry, and I withdrew my fingers, wondering if I would be able to wipe them off when I sat. My excitement increased when I walked Rivera's young wife. What a beauty she was. My excitement increased when in walked Rivera's young wife. What a beauty she was, with long raven hair, piercing eyes, a beautiful mouth, and a figure draped exotically in a Mexican zarape, like a bath towel a girl wraps around under her armpits. Only the zarape she wore was so flimsy you could see through it, and she wore nothing underneath. Diego and she made a paradoxically artistic pair. From the instant of our arrival, there was animated talk, but there were so many more sophisticated people here, I kept quiet. I was aware of the master's startling paintings on the wall, on easels, in corners of the room. They were, of course, the controversial proletarian paintings of the Mexican people, peons in the field, workers carrying red flags, all those scenes that made Rivera a communist symbol in many lands. Rivera was doing no drinking, but the others were, a special drink from the cactus plant in Mexico. If you take enough of it, you see a burnt matchstick on the floor, and you think it's a log. For a time, the painter got off in a corner with Dolores, Carmen, and Lily, while I moved about, examining his art. I glanced out of a window. Beyond was the magnificent mountain called Popocatépetl. Magnificent mountain called Popocatépetl. Look to the left, the fabulous pyramids that the Aztecs built. Turn a bit more to the right, close up, and there was a convent across the street. I stared at it, glass-topped, high-walled, covered with the most beautiful flowers, thick stems of bougainvillea, ginger, and the lovely flowery cactus tree. I was dying to look inside those convent walls. I couldn't get over the contrast between a convent with its nuns and novitiates right by this arty bohemian radical center where, it was hinted, Rivera himself more or less led the communist movement in the Latin American world. Altogether unexpectedly, Rivera left the others. Maybe he wanted to get away from his wife. Maybe he wanted to take a piss on the cactus in the garden. Maybe he just wanted fresh air. He came over to me and motioned for me to go with him. I felt favored. As we moved into the outer garden, we drifted into a disagreement at once. "Have you read Prescott?" he asked. He didn't speak English very well, and my Spanish at that time was very shaky. "You know," he went on, "Prescott, The Conquest of Mexico." "Oh, Prescott, sure, great." Here his book became like that of a boxer dog. Here his look became like that of a boxer dog. He had several chins, and they seemed to drop to his armpits. A belligerence came over him. His eyelids fell. His nostrils distended to their uttermost. distended to their uttermost. He had set up Prescott in order to knock him down. That piratical Englishman, the swine has distorted the whole matter. How can you say that? His was one of the greatest historical chronicles of the world. Caramba, caracho, chingo, words rudely mellowed into English. That goddamn son of a bitch, Prescott. He writes, you paint. He paints too with ink. I think his work will stand longer than yours. Rivera looked at me with some interest. I followed through. When you put down your brush, he will still remain more important than you. I couldn't have told him any plainer than that, even if I hadn't known what I was talking about. I ground my heel into him a bit more, denounced the current habit of the Mexican painters of portraying the downtrodden proletariat by showing some worker holding the hammer and sickle while some wicked capitalist had his foot on the back of the man's neck and stamped his face into the mud. Why, I asked, don't you know color is more important? His face went from red to white, white to purple, proving what I said about color. I interrupted his change of colors. The same goes for Orozco and the others of the Mexican school. Here I made my usual mistake. Now take Salvador Dali. He's not interested in politics. That was as far as I got. He went from red to very red, verged towards apoplexy. I'll withdraw that, I said. I think there is no use in us talking of these things. That is true. We had a moment's uncomfortable silence. Anyway, he said, isn't it good to get away from them? He referred to his wife, Lily, and the others. He stood in front of a cactus bush, breathed heavily, remarked that some people wanted him to paint still life. The thought of it provoked more Mexican expletives. He was the most explosive personality I had ever encountered. You were talking about the glories of color. I heard you talking about the color in my pictures, and you were telling me that color is more important than what one has to say. What the hell do you know about color? I waited. He asked, can you get emotion out of color? Yes. More than from music? No. Now, Mr. Flynn, I know that you don't know what you're talking about. Senor Rivera, isn't it possible that perhaps I could like both? He looked at me as if I were some novice in this area, which I certainly was. Now, I'll show you something. I want to show you how little you know, all right? All right. You see those little potted cacti? You see this one? He pointed to where a lovely Mexican flower had closed itself up like a rose with sunset colors, a delicate pastel shade. That is how they go to sleep. Amusing, yes? He said, now watch. He took the cigarette out of my mouth, put it to the flower. Sure as hell, the flower opened. You see, he remarked, like women, you have to be tough, rough, brutal. I kept quiet. There was a lot I could still learn about painting, color, women, and men like Rivera. This plant has power, he said. I've carefully cultivated this myself, and I take a great deal of pleasure in seeing it growing alongside that convent you keep staring at. He seemed to be in a lighter mood as he talked of the plant and even laughed a bit. He asked, have you ever heard a painting? Heard what? I said, suppose you looked at a painting and heard it play a symphony. Would you be surprised? I didn't follow. Suppose you returned to my studio and you stood in front of one of my paintings and you heard it. You heard music coming from the canvas. As he talked, he moved from one potted plant to the other, fingering them, pressing them fondly, almost caressing them. He took from a pocket a few sheets of zigzag French paper, the kind of little tissues you use in rolling cigarettes. This plant, he explained, will allow you to do both. After smoking this, you will see a painting and you will hear it as well. It dawned on me that he was rolling in that zigzag paper the loco weed referred to in the conquest of Mexico, the plant called marijuana in Mexico, ganja in Jamaica, anise sativa in other parts of the world, hashish in the Far East. As he took a puff, he said, "Look, be sure that nobody besides us knows what we're going to do. I will take you up to the storeroom. You will see paintings there I show to nobody else." He glanced into the interior of the house, then nudged me in the direction of a side door. We went inside, up some stairs. It was a storeroom for his materials, his paints, canvases, frames. He crossed the room to where there were a couple of big pots of turpentine. He pulled out from under or near them a little can. The lid opened easily. I peered in. It contained some brown pulpy material that looked like the color of the bottom end of a cigarette holder. "You can either chew it or smoke it," he said. "This is the same weed the Spanish found here in the 15th century. Cortez brought back gold and silver, but he forgot this. I will hear the painting. You will hear the color." The idea of having sounds translated into terms of paintings, and paintings translated into terms of music. A fascinating idea. I smoked some of it, ate a little of it. Diego was talking, observing me. I didn't hear much of what he was saying. I was absorbed, waiting for a reaction. Suddenly, I started to sweat. I could feel my extremities going numb, from the elbow down to the hand, and from the knee down to the foot. Felt a strange sense of touch. Yet you wanted to touch things, and if you did, there was a numb feeling. Now I felt paralyzed, yet capable of motion. Over me came the sensation of being suspended in time. All sense of its passage was gone. Everything about me seemed frozen, taut, permanent. I wasn't certain where we were going, whether among his paintings or in his garden. Yet we were moving slowly, timelessly. His voice came to me hypnotically. It was getting dark. Mexico. Where was I? I could hear from the convent across the way a girls' choir singing in Latin. Strangely, I could distinguish the peculiar Latin litany. Beyond was the brilliant evening sky, the sun lowering like a neat round diver. The pyramids pushed upward into the same red sky. I had the extraordinary feeling that I couldn't cope with this sensation. Immobile, transfixed, still we were moving, thickly. Once at the studio doorway, looking within, there was a momentary vision. His wife now wore a violently colored robe off at the shoulder, and it swept ankle length. There was a small red bow at the back of her neck around the fluent length of hair, and then the raven mane dipped downward like a black snake to the cleavage of her buttocks. I stared. All was exotic, heightened, and Rivera himself stayed close by, talking talk that only dimly entered into me. By now, too, I lost the sense of balance, which was remarkable for me. From somewhere came a cry that dinner was ready. "Food!" I shouted to the heavens, arms up, singing, imploring. I sipped no cup and I crave no crumb, while I sigh for the love of a lady. While I sigh for the love of a laddie. Rivera was amused at my disabled reactions. He talked on in a Mexicanized English, directing me into a showroom of pictures, his early works, intended, he said, for the Mexican people. "Here it is quiet," he suggested. "Listen to Mexico. Look at my pictures and listen to Mexico." Whether it was auto-suggestion or not, whether it was the suggestive power of a tremendous personality profoundly affecting a young man given so much of his time, or whatever it was, the marijuana, as some will say it was, I heard these pictures singing, the simple Mexican themes, a woman on a mule moving through a field of cacti, the peasants at their labor in rhythm, illumination in color and sound. In a symphony I could see, feel, and hear, but can never translate into words. No question about it. Bizarre, I know, but I was there.